Hi everyone, welcome back to the Be Kind, Be Happy story time. And for today, we are going to finish the Platform Sutra. We are currently up to chapter 10. Chapter 10 is transmission. So if you haven't watched the previous episodes, the previous chapters, let me just give a very quick brief. So chapter 1 was about the origins of the Sixth Patriarch, Neng, the Sixth Patriarch, Master Neng. He was talking about explaining his great enlightenment, how he received the transmission of the bow and robe, and how he became the Sixth Patriarch and attained his sudden awakening. The second chapter was about prajñā, wisdom, straight to the point, talking about the wisdom of right view, right perception, why this sutra is known as the sudden teaching, because it points directly to the self-nature using wisdom. Number 3, chapter 3 was talking about the using wisdom to answer questions from the assembly. So how to apply wisdom in everyday life. So the assembly was asking questions about the Pure Land practice, about Amitabha Buddha, about Bodhidharma, which was the first patriarch, and his interaction with the Emperor Wu at the time, where Emperor Wu was asking questions about merits and blessings, and so how to apply wisdom in everyday life. Chapter 4 was now introducing wisdom with meditation. So it's called meditation and wisdom. And Huineng Dashi, Huineng Venerable Master Huineng, was explaining that they are not dualistic concepts and that they are one and one the same. So they are mutually codependent, and you cannot have wisdom without meditation, and you cannot have meditation without wisdom. One does not come first, they arise simultaneously. They are one and the same. Chapter 5 was delving deeper into meditation, and so it was labeled seated meditation, talking about how to meditate, what to meditate on. And this has a lot less to do with the body posture, about the external practice, not even the internal practice. This is just about view, how to have right view. This entire sutra was based around having right view. Chapter 6 was about repentance. So repentance was very interesting. It goes way beyond repenting past errors. It goes into how to prevent future errors by being remorseful. So practicing as a dualistic practice of repentance and remorse. So to repent for past wrong deeds, but also remorseful towards prevention of future wrong deeds. Then it talks about the 4 great vows, talks about the 3 refuges, and it talks about how to really establish yourself as a serious, devout Buddhist practitioner. Chapter 7 was about encounters. Encounters, this was one of the longest chapters of the sutra. It took me about over 2 hours to go through the entire chapter, because it was just full of mini stories of interchanges and encounters between the great Venerable Master Neng with all the people that he met along his journey. And so another very interesting chapter. It starts off with talking about all the encounters he had with people that had room for development, and he was helping them solve those problems. Towards the end of the chapter, he was describing his encounters with high-level cultivators. And so it was a very interesting chapter that showed a good contrast between low-level and high-level understanding of self-nature. Chapter 8 chapter 7, as you can see, is very, very long. Chapter 8 was the distinction between sudden and gradual. And so here he makes the contrast between his school of the south with the north school of Shen Zui. So Shen Zui, very humble practitioner. Even though he was the master of the gradual school, he was still very, very, he spoke very highly of Huineng. So Shen Zui was supposed to be the sixth patriarch, and everyone saw him as the future sixth patriarch. But then out of nowhere, Huineng came and showed his level of enlightenment. And so the fifth patriarch, Hongren Dashi, gave the robe and bowl to Huineng instead of Shen Zui. So those two schools are at great conflict with each other, and it's very, very entertaining, I guess you can say. But there's a very big difference between the sudden school and the gradual school. And this was highlighted in chapter 8. Chapter 9 was about the proclamations. So Huineng Dashi, Master Huineng, was invited to receive offerings, but he didn't want to go. So he was giving his speech or his Dharma talk on self-nature to the person that was delivering the offering, delivering the invitation. His name was Xie Jian. And so this chapter was a very short chapter, basically him explaining to the emperors his understanding of the Dharma in a very short and concise way. So very good value for your time. Finally, now we are going to go into transmissions. So transmissions, normally a transmission is when a patriarch is transmitting the Dharma, the robe and the bowl, to the future patriarch. This time is very different because the sixth patriarch, Huineng, at his level, at his stage, he stopped the transmission to one single person. And so he ended the tradition of continuously passing down the robe and bowl. By the way, this robe and bowl was handed down from the Buddha himself. So there's a direct lineage from the great Buddha down here to the sixth patriarch. And now he's decided to change the tradition. Why, you will see. But not only does it talk about that transmission, but it was also talking about the transmission of the Dharma to all future sentient beings. And this was him explaining his final messages and final plans before he was entering his stage of death. So here he was talking a lot about how to carry on practicing without him. He was explaining to his assembly, but also closing off the entire sutra, which basically illustrates his entire life. So this is a very good, tidy way to finish off the sutra and finish off his journey as a practitioner as a sixth patriarch. So let's get started. So, chapter 10, transmission. One day, the master summoned his disciples, Fa Hai, Zi Chen, Fa Da, Shen Hui, Zi Chang, Zi Tong, Zi Chi, Zi Dao, Fa Zhen, and Fa Ru, and said, "You are different from other people. After my extinction, you should each become a master in a different region. I will now teach you how to preach the Dharma without losing the fundamental doctrine." So this is already showing the intention of the entire chapter. Instead of transmitting to one particular person, he's going to be doing it to about 10 different disciples, and he will be sending them off to spread the Dharma seeds in different areas. And now he's highlighting the purpose of the chapter is to teach how to preach the Dharma without losing the fundamental doctrine. So this is something that we can all learn from. So that how can we share, and how can we share these Buddhist teachings with the people around in our lives? First, you should discuss the 3 categories of the teaching and the 36 responses of active functioning. Coming out and going in, transcend the 2 extremes. In preaching all the dharmas, do not depart from the self-nature. So, how to base ourselves in that non-abiding state is the purpose of this chapter. If suddenly one asks you about the Dharma, Say something that will exhaust dichotomies. You should always use the teachings of the responses, such as mutual causation of coming and going. The dualistic dharmas will be thoroughly eliminated, and the questioner will have no recourse, literally no place to go. So exhausting the dichotomies means to not side towards one extreme, because the nature of duality is that everything comprises of two extremes: good and bad, right and wrong, yes and no, like and dislike, heaven and hell, enlightenment and samsara, wisdom and ignorance. And so here he's teaching us to lead someone in a way that it exhausts both extremes, so that they are left with no place to go. Very interesting. The three categories of the teachings are the skandhas, the five aggregates, the realms, and the entrances. Skandhas refers to the five skandhas of form, feeling, thoughts, impulses, and consciousness. Impulses is also referred to as volition in some contexts. So entrances then refers to the 12 entrances, and then the 6 types are external, and then there are 6 types are internal. The external are the external environment. The 6 types of external senses are the form, sound, smells, tastes, tangibles, and dharmas, meaning mental formations. And the 6 internal sense organs, of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. So these are the 12 entrances. Then there's the realms, referring to the 18 realms, being the 6 types of sensory data, so the external, the 6 senses, so the body, and the 6 consciousnesses. So the consciousnesses are what arises between the eye and vision and form. So that's the visual consciousness. The ear and sound gives rise to audio consciousness, and so forth. The self-nature is able to incorporate the myriad dharmas and is named the storehouse consciousness. If one activates thinking, it is the formation consciousness, the generation of the 6 consciousnesses to exit the 6 senses and see the 6 types of sensory data. So here he's saying that these 3 categories of the teachings are the skandhas, the realms, and the entrances, and that we should always use the teachings, these 3 teachings, to share the Dharma, the Buddha teachings. Okay, so because there's actually a lot in this paragraph. So the 3 categories of the teachings that we should always frame around the messages of the Buddha Dharma that we are speaking of always should be revolving around the skandhas. So this is what creates the illusion of ego, the self. The self is always limited by form, feeling, thoughts, impulses, and consciousnesses. And so it's because of the skandhas that gives rise to the illusion of self. If we are to point to the self nature, we have to always talk in reference to the skandhas. And then the illusion of reality, the illusion of the world that we live in is always from the realms and the entrances. And so that's why we should talk and teach in regards to these 3 categories. Everything that we abide in terms of reality comes from the 6 sense organs, comes from the 6 external sense realms, and together they create the 6 consciousnesses. Okay, moving on. Thus are the 18 realms. All of them are functioning that are activated from the self nature. If the self nature is false, it activates the 18 falsely. If the self-nature is correct, it activates the 18 correctly. If the functions are bad, then they are the functions of sentient beings. If they are good, then they are the functions of a Buddha. On what do the functions depend? They exist on the basis of the self-nature. So everything in terms of the 18 realms arise from self-nature. So it is to say, the form of the 18 realms arise from emptiness of the self-nature. The mind of a sentient being arises from the mind of a Buddha. And so if we are perceiving these realms incorrectly, we are a sentient being. If we are perceiving these realms correctly, we are functioning as a Buddha. The responses include the 5 insentient responses of the external realms, the responses of heaven and earth, the response of sun and moon, the response of bright and dark, the response of yin and yang, and the response of water and fire. And these are the 5 responses. There are 12 responses of the words of the characteristics of Dharma, the response of words and Dharma. So, by the way, these are all the dualistic concepts. And this make up the 64 responses, the 36 responses of active functioning. So basically everything that can be possibly talked about will always have some linkage to one of these 36 responses, which is actually just 18 responses. 18 times 2 is 36. And each response is dualistic. So we've talked about the 5 insentient responses, being that they are just the environment, the environmental response, the environmental responses, like heaven, earth, sun, moon, bright, dark, yin and yang, and water and fire. Now there are the 12 responses of the words of the characteristics of Dharma, and so this is, when we talk about Dharma, we're talking about concepts. We're talking about phenomena. And these are more towards mental. The response of words and Dharma, being and non-being, form and formless, characteristics and without characteristics, defiled and undefiled, response, and finally, and then there's the form and emptiness, motion and stillness, pure and impure, ordinary and sage, monk and lay person, old and young, large and small. And these are the 12 responses. The 12 responses in relation to Dharma. Then there are the 19 responses of functions activated from the self-nature. The responses of long and short, false and correct, stupid and wise, foolish and sagacious, disruption and concentration, compassion and ill will, literally poison, the response of morality and transgression, straight and crooked, real and empty, steep and level, affliction and bodhi, permanent and impermanent, commiseration and injury, joy and anger, generosity and stinginess, advancement and regression, generation and extinction, dharmakaya and physical body, nirmanakaya and sambhogakaya. And these are the 19 responses. So 19 plus 12 plus 5 is 36. The 36 responses. The master said, if you understand how to use these 36 responses, you are able to explain the teachings of all the sutras. Exiting and entering transcend the 2 extremes. The self-nature mobilizes the functions. So if we are able to teach any of the Buddhist teachings within, with reference to any of these 36 responses, then we are able to transcend the two extremes. When speaking with people externally, you can transcend characteristics within characteristics, and internally you can transcend emptiness within emptiness. So externally, we can transcend the environment of the characteristics within the environment of characteristics, and internally we can transcend emptiness within emptiness. Those who are entirely attached to characteristics will increase their false views. Those who are entirely attached to emptiness will increase their ignorance. Those who are attached to emptiness will slander the sutras. Just speak and do not use written words. Suppose you do not use written words. If there are also people to whom you should not speak, just say as follows. This is the characteristic of written words. You may also say, I simply speak but do not posit written words. This is not to posit written words. They are also written words. Hearing someone preach, you may revile them, saying they are attached to written words. You should understand that you may be deluded yourself and also revile the Buddha sutras. You must not revile the sutras, which is a transgression immeasurable. You may be attached to characteristics externally and teach that one should seek the true, or you may extensively establish training centers and preach about the errors of being and non-being. Such people will not be able to see the nature for aeon and eon. So this is basically what he's saying you should stay away from doing. Don't rely on the written word. And when we are speaking, we should be speaking without attachment to the words we are saying, so that we don't attach to both views of attaching to the concept, but also not attaching to the other extreme of emptiness. And if we are to do that, then even though we are extensively establishing training centers and preaching, we are still preaching about the wrong, the errors of being and non-being. And this is a transgression immeasurable. So what should we do? Simply listen and cultivate according to the Dharma. Also, do not think about the 100 things and be impeded with regard to the enlightenment nature. If you listen to this explanation and do not cultivate, you will generate false thoughts. Just cultivate according to the Dharma, bequeathing the Dharma without abiding in characteristics. If all of you would be enlightened, rely on this for your preaching, rely on this for your functioning, rely on this for your practice, rely on this for all your actions. You will not lose the fundamental doctrine. So basically, to stay away from either extremes when we are preaching, when we are practicing, when we are doing anything in life, to abstain from either extremes. When people inquire about the doctrines, when they ask of being, respond with non-being. When they ask of non-being, respond with being. When they ask of the ordinary, respond with the sagely. When they ask of the sagely, respond with the ordinary. Through the two modes of speaking, you will generate the doctrine of the middle. Respond to them one by one, and if there are any other questions, make up your response according to this, and you will not go wrong. If someone asks you what is darkness, you should answer, brightness is the cause and darkness is the condition. When brightness disappears, there is darkness. Brightness reveals darkness and darkness reveals brightness. Through the modes of coming and going, you will create the doctrine of the middle. All other questions should be handled like this. Later, you will transmit the Dharma. Later, when you transmit the Dharma, you may rely on this to develop material for teaching. Don't lose the central doctrine. So he's using darkness and brightness as an example, but you could use basically any dualistic concept and it'd be the same. So to say, what is darkness? You should answer, brightness is the cause and darkness is the condition. What is good? Bad is the cause and good is the condition. What is right? Wrong is the cause and right is the condition. So you're defining one against its opposite. What is nirvana? Samsara is the cause of nirvana, and nirvana is the condition. What is Buddha? Sentient being is the cause, and Buddha is the condition. So when brightness disappears, there is darkness. When ignorance disappears, there is wisdom. When wrong disappears, there is right. When sentient beings disappear, there is the Buddha. Brightness reveals darkness, and darkness reveals brightness. Wisdom reveals ignorance, and ignorance reveals wisdom. Good reveals bad, and bad reveals good. Right reveals wrong, and wrong reveals right. Sentient being reveals the Buddha, and Buddha reveals sentient being. Through the modes of coming and going, you will create the doctrine of the middle. So depending on how people are asking a question, you shape it according to that. In the 7th month of the first year of the thich, which is great ultimate period, the 49th hexagonary year, the Yan extended peace year, or 712, this year was changed during the 5th month of Yan. In the 8th month, Xuanzong took the throne, and the year period was changed to Xiantian. The following year, the year period was changed to Kai Yuan. The other texts have this as occurring during Xiantian, but this is incorrect. So this is just some details. So in this period, basically, to continue on, in this period, the master ordered his followers to go to Guo'en Si, which is National Gratitude Monastery, in Xinzhou, to construct a stupa. He had them hurry the work, and the unveiling was at the end of the summer, the following year. On the first day of the 7th month, he assembled his followers and said, so after the construction of the stupa, he announced, I will depart from this world in the 8th month. If any of you have doubts, you should come to me about them soon. I will resolve them, or to destroy your doubts for you and make your delusions disappear. After I am gone, there will be no one to teach you. So this is the nature of enlightened beings. They are able to, you can say, predict, or you can say they are able to decide their departing date and when they choose to leave the world. And this is what he's saying now. And he's saying, before I leave, let me know whatever doubt is on your mind, and I will resolve them for you. And that is because doubt, the greater the doubt, the greater the enlightenment. And doubt is the obstruction for clarity. Fa Hai and the others listened, and everyone wept. Only Shen Hui was emotionally unmoved and did not cry. The master said, young master Shen Hui, you have become able to be unmoved before good and bad, before praise and blame, without generating sorrow and joy. You others have not attained this. What way can you have been cultivating all these years on this mountain? So everyone was very emotional regarding the departure of the great Sixth Patriarch Neng, except for Shen Hui, which was unmoving, and that solicited great praise from the master. Just to repeat, he said, you have become able to be unmoved before good and bad, before praise and blame, without generating sorrow and joy. And then he said to everyone else, you others have not attained this. What way can you have been cultivating all these years on the mountain? So to be unmoving despite good and bad, right and wrong, is the very essence of the non-abiding, of being untouched by all the phenomena. And that is the practice of non-practice, the practice of the Platform Sutra. Who is it you're crying for so sadly now? If you're sorry for me, you don't know where I am going. I know myself where I am going. If I didn't know where I was going, I wouldn't be announcing it to you in advance. You're all crying because you don't know where I'm going. If you knew where I was going, you wouldn't be crying. The Dharma nature is fundamentally without extinction and generation, going and coming. You should all sit down, and I will recite a verse for you. This is called the verse of true and provisional motion and stillness. You should recite this verse with the same meaning as mine. You should cultivate according to this without losing the central doctrine. The assembly of monks bowed and requested that the master recite the verse, and the verse went, "All things are without any truth. Do not see them as true. If you see them as true, this is for what you see to be completely untrue. If you are able to possess the true yourself, transcend the provisional and your mind will be true. If you do not transcend the provisional in your own mind, you will be without true, for where could the true be located? If you are sentient, then you are able to move. If you are insentient, that which is insentient is immobile. If you cultivate the practice of motionlessness, you become identical with the immobility of insentiency. If you are seeking the true motionlessness, then realize that there is a motionlessness of motion. Motionlessness is motionlessness. Insentient objects lack the seed of Buddhahood. If you are able to discriminate well characteristics, the cardinal meaning of Buddhism is motionlessness. Just to have such a view is to have functioning that is such like. I am telling you, students, make an effort and be careful. Do not in this gateway of the Mahayana grasp onto the wisdom of birth and death. If you can correspond to the truth upon hearing these words, then we may discuss the doctrines of the Buddha together. If you in fact do not achieve correspondence, then hold your palms together and in the Anjali Mudra be joyful that you've encountered the teaching at all. This teaching is fundamentally without disputation, for disputation leads only to error. To grasp and oppose and dispute the teaching is for one's nature to enter into birth and death. After the assembly heard Neng speak this verse, they all did obeisance. Everyone there understood the master's point, and they all composed their minds and became determined to cultivate in reliance on the Dharma without any further disputation. So, let's have a quick look back. All things are without any truth. Do not see them as true. If you see the true, this is for what you see to be completely untrue. So this is again talking about the duality of concepts. If we see that they are true, then they become untrue. If we see them as untrue, then they become true. If you are sentient, then you are able to move. That which is insentient cannot move. If you cultivate the practice of motionlessness, you become identical to the immobility of insentiency. So he's saying that sentiency is the ability to move. If you are practicing the practice of motionlessness, then you are just behaving like an insentient being. If you are seeking the true motionlessness, then realize that there is motionlessness in motion. Motionlessness is motionlessness. Sentient objects lack the seed of Buddhahood. So if we want to practice the path of real motionlessness, then we have to practice it within motion. And that is to realize the motionlessness of motion. If we are just practicing motionlessness by not moving, that is to say, not moving the mind, then we are just practicing the path of insentiency. So we have to allow the mind to move, but remain unmoving within the mind, within the moving mind. That is not to say to force the mind to not move and for everything to not move and thinking that that is motionlessness. That is called insentiency, according to Neng. If you can respond to the truth upon hearing these words, then we may discuss the doctrines of the Buddha together. If you in fact do not achieve correspondence, at least be joyful that you've encountered the teachings at all. This teaching is fundamentally without disputation. Without disputation means without grasping to either extreme, because disputation only arises when you're arguing from one standpoint. But if you're not arguing from any standpoint, any fixed standpoint, then that is to practice the teaching that is fundamentally without disputation. Because disputation leads only to errors, to grasp and oppose and dispute the teaching is for one's nature to enter birth and death. As long as we are arguing from specific standpoints and fixed to those standpoints, then we are entering the nature of birth and death. And that's why the master here is saying, don't respond, only respond to people with the opposite extreme. If someone is saying, why is this good? Explain why it's bad. If they're explaining why it's bad, explain why it's also good. So you're taking them away from their extremes while not entering an extreme yourself. To enter an extreme yourself would be to argue your way regardless of what other people say. But to not enter an extreme is to only use the opposing extreme when being confronted by someone that has an extreme. Then you're taking the opposite extreme, but you're not clinging to one of your own extremes that you are then preaching, regardless of what the situation is. So it's like saying the Dharma is good. If someone says the Dharma is good, you're saying, yeah, the Dharma is good. If someone says the Dharma is bad, you're saying, yeah, the Dharma is good. If someone's not saying anything, then you're still saying, yeah, the Dharma is good. So we should always only be saying something in response to the person's perspective. If someone says the Dharma is good, then you can say the Dharma is bad. If someone says the Dharma is bad, then you say the Dharma is good. If someone's not saying anything, then there's no need to respond with anything. Why is the Dharma bad? The Dharma is bad if you're attached to the Dharma. So if someone is saying that the Dharma is good and you get the feeling that it's because they are attached to the practice, you have to explain that the real essence of the Dharma is non-practice. The real essence of the Dharma is non-dualistic. So you have to take them away from the attachment of the Dharma. Realizing that great Master Hui Neng will not remain in the world for long, Elder Fa Hai bowed once more and asked, after your reverence has entered nirvana, to whom will the robe and Dharma be bequeathed? The master said, there is a summary in circulation of my sermon in Da Fan Si, and my teachings up to now entitled Platform Sutra of the Dharma Treasure. You should all protect this text and transmit it. In your saving of the myriad living beings, you should rely on only these sermons, which is the sermons that we are reading now, which were already written, or at least being written, during the life of Hui Neng. And the sutras were, with the Platform Sutra and the texts were being stored in Da Fan Si monastery. This is called the correct Dharma. I have preached the Dharma for you now, but I will not bequeath the robe. This is because your roots of faith are mature, you are definitely without doubt, and you are able to undertake the great affair. In accordance with the intention of the former patriarch, Great Master Bodhidharma, the first patriarch that arrived onto the shores of China from India, in the bequest of his final verse, the robe should not be transmitted. What he said, his verse went, I originally came to this land to transmit the Dharma and save deluded sentient beings. A single flower opens into 5 leaves and the fruit will appear of itself. So what he's saying is that he came with one robe and bowl, one transmission, but this will then spread into 5 and multiply that way. It will not stay as 1 to 1 to 1. The master said further, so Hui Neng said further, good friends, you have each purified your minds and listened to me preach the Dharma. If you wish to achieve the planting of the roots of wisdom, you must master the samadhi of single characteristics and the samadhi of the single practice. If in all locations you do not reside in characteristics, if within those characteristics you do not generate revulsion or attraction and are also without grasping and rejecting, if you do not think about matters such as the creation and destruction of personal benefit, and if you are relaxed and quiet and emptily melded with the pallid and simple, this is the samadhi of the single characteristic. So he's explaining how to cultivate the right dharma, the right practice, which is, if you want to be planting the roots of wisdom, then you have to cultivate the samadhi of single characteristics and the samadhi of the single practice. And he just he just explained what the samadhi of single characteristic is, which is in all locations, so to not reside, do not attach to any phenomena. If when you are within the phenomena, you don't generate attachment or revulsion towards it, and you are neither grasping or rejecting, and you are also not contemplating the matters of personal benefit, and instead you are always relaxed, quiet, and emptily melded in the pallid and simple. That is to cultivate the samadhi of the single practice. Now, if in all your walking, standing, sitting, and lying down, you have a pure and unified, straightforward mind, not moving from the place of enlightenment, truly creating a pure land, this is the samadhi of the single practice. The samadhi of the single practice here is defined as, regardless of which ones of the four comportments you are abiding in, the four comportments being walking, standing, sitting, and lying, because we are always doing one of those four. Regardless of which one you are doing, you're always pure and unified in your straightforward mind, and that straightforward, purified, unified mind is the place of enlightenment, and you are not moving from there. Then you are always creating and abiding simultaneously your own pure land, and that is the samadhi of the single practice. Those who accomplish both samadhis are like the earth bearing seeds, which it stores and nourishes during their maturation into fruit. So is it with the samadhis of the single characteristic and single practice. My preaching the Dharma to you now is like the timely rains that moisten the great earth, and your Buddha natures are likened to the seeds encountering this watering. Your Buddha natures will all begin to grow. Those who partake of my meaning will definitely attain Bodhi. Those who rely on this practice will certainly realize the wondrous fruit. Listen to my verse, which says, the mind ground stores the various seeds, with all sprouting through the universal rain. With the flower of sudden enlightenment, intelligence is ended, and the fruit of Bodhi forms of itself. After the master spoke this verse, he said, the Dharma is non-dual, and the mind is likewise. The way, which is Tao, enlightenment, is pure and without the various characteristics. You should all be careful not to contemplate purity or make the mind empty. The mind is pure and cannot be grasped or rejected. You should all make an effort. Go well, according to your needs. The members of the congregation then bowed and dispersed. On the 8th day of the 7th month, Great Master Huineng suddenly addressed his following, saying, I am going to return to Xinzhou. Get a boat ready quickly. The large congregation then cried out, trying their best to get him to stay. The master said, the appearance of the Buddhas is like the manifestation of nirvana. Where there is coming, there must be going. This is an everlasting rule, the fundamental truth. There must be some location to which this skeletal form will revert. The congregation said, when you leave now, how soon will you return? So they're asking of his return. The master said, leaves fall and revert to roots. I cannot say when I will return. They asked further, to whom has the storehouse of the eye of the correct Dharma been transmitted? The master said, those who are enlightened have attained it. Those who are without mind have penetrated it. They asked again, won't there be some difficulties in the future? So this is a very interesting question that someone asked. They're asking about the future. And what does he predict for the future? The master said very, very specifically and clearly, 6 or 7 years after my nirvana, a person will come to take my head. So the head, the dead head, which is in the coffin. Listen to my prediction. On the head, cultivating intimacy; in the mouth, a need for repast; encountering the difficulty of sufficiency, with willows the officials. Huining also said, 70 years after I go, 2 bodhisattvas will come from the east, one a monk and one a lay person. They will simultaneously establish my teaching and make it flourish, decorating the monasteries and making many transmissions. The members of the congregation asked, we do not know through what generations the transmission has proceeded from the appearance of the Buddhas and patriarchs of the past. Please reveal this to us. The master said, the ancient Buddhas have responded to the world in numbers immeasurable and beyond calculation. For the moment, however, we take 7 Buddhas as the beginning. Vipassana Buddha, Sikhin Buddha, Visadbu Buddha of the ornamentation eon of the past, the Kruku Chanda Buddha, Kanaka Muni Buddha, Kasyapa Buddha, and the 7th one being the current Buddha, the Sakyamuni Buddha of the present auspicious eon. These are the 7 Buddhas. Taking Sakyamuni Buddha as the first of the 7th Buddhas, the transmission is as follows. Number 1, the world-honored Mahakasyapa. Number 2, so he's talking about the original lineage. So when the Buddha died, he became the first transmission. After he died, he handed the bow and robe to his number 2, which is technically the first patriarch of the entire lineage. Bodhidharma is the first patriarch of the Chan school in China. But the first actual lineage, the first actual patriarch, is the great honored Mahakasyapa, which was the great disciple of the Buddha. Number 2, the great honored Ananda. Ananda is the cousin of the Buddha and was also the closest attendant, which was basically every single Buddha, every single sutra that we read is through the words of Ananda. So he always says, thus have I heard. And so he's recounting, because Ananda had supernatural, superhuman memory. He was able to memorize everything that entered his 6 senses with complete clarity. So it was him that was reciting all the Buddhas, all the sutras for everyone to recite, to reverse, and now eventually to write down. So it was because of Ananda that we have the sutras in the first place. Number 3, the honored one, Sanavasa. Number 4. So now we're getting into the times beyond Amitabha, Sakyamuni Buddha. Beyond the Buddha, we have a lot of these people that did not yet exist during the time of the Buddha. Honored, so number 3, honored one, Sanavasa. Number 4, the honored one, Upagupta. Number 5, the honored one, Ditika. Number 6, the honored one, Misraka. Number 7, the honored one, Vasumitra. Number 8, the honored one, Buddha Nandi. Number 9, the honored one, Buddha Mitra. Number 10, the honored one, Pasva. Number 11, the honored one, Punyayasas. Number 12, the honored one, Asvagosa. Number 13, the honored one, Kapimala. Number 14, the honored one, Nagarjuna. Number 15, the honored one, Kanadeva. Number 16, the honored one, Wahulata. Number 17, the honored one, Samganandi. Number 18, the honored one, Gayasata. Number 19, the honored one, Kamuralata. Number 20, the honored one, Jayata. Number 21, the Honored One Vasubandhu. Number 22, the Honored One Manorahita. Number 23, the Honored One Helena Yasas. Number 24, the Honored One Samabiku. Number 25, the Honored One Vasista. Number 26, the Honored One Punyamitra. Number 27, the Honored One Prajñā. Number 28, the Honored One Bodhidharma. So from the 28th became the initial first patriarch of China. And then now we continue on number 29, Great Master Hui Ke, which is the number one disciple of the Bodhidharma, to which he translated the robe and bow to. Very interesting story with Hui Ke was that to show his respect and sincerity in requesting the Dharma from Bodhidharma. At the time, Bodhidharma was meditating in the cave facing a rock for many, many years. I think it was like 9 years. And it was snowing. And the Great Master Hui Ke came and was requesting the Dharma from Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma didn't even pay him any attention, saying, many people come and go, you are no different, leave. But to show his sincerity in requesting the Dharma, what he did was stand within the snow, stand in the snow for many, many, many days. Bodhidharma came out to just finally give him some attention and said, you should leave, don't waste your time. The Dharma is not easy to practice. Only the people who really show true intention are able to fathom the profundity of the Dharma. So then Bodhidharma went back into his cave to practice meditation. What Hui Ke did after that was to show his reverence to the Dharma. He just cut off his arm. This is, if you were to go by the sutras, if you were to go by the teachings, what he actually did was to cut off his arm. And then that was when Bodhidharma said, okay, you're showing a little bit of sincerity, I will give you my time. And because of how sincere Hui Ke was in his practice, he became the second patriarch of China. Continuing on, number 33, Great Master Shenkan, 31. No, that was number 30. 31, Great Master Dao Xin. 32 was Hong Ren. And now he is 38, the 33rd patriarch, the 33rd official patriarch. From the beginning, the patriarchs have each had successors. In the future, when it comes to letting the transmission be carried out, you must not make mistakes. Just as an FYI, when I was a practicing Buddhist monk in Fukongsan Monastery in Taiwan, which now has over 300 monasteries and temples around the world, my master at the time, I still see him as my master, is the Great Venerable Master Xing Yun. And Xing Yun is the 48th patriarch of Chinese Buddhism. So if you were to add 48 to 28, being number one for Bodhidharma, 48 plus 28 is 76. So Venerable Master Xing Yun, who is still alive to this day, I think he's like 93 years old. And a lot of my progress, a lot of my attainments, a lot of my practice, is because of the great Venerable Master Xing Yun and everything that he has done for Buddhism, for the Dharma. And so he is the 76th patriarch or the 48th patriarch in Chinese Buddhism, just as an FYI. So he also has a direct lineage to the great Buddha himself. Great Master Hui Neng, after a vegetarian feast at Guo'en Si in Xinzhou at the initial third day of the 8th month of the 50th hexagenary year, the second year of the Xiantian period, addressed his followers, All of you sit according to your stations. I am going to part from you. Fahai addressed him. Your Reverence, what teaching is it you leave so that the deluded people of later times will be able to see the Buddha nature? Because that is the fundamental reason why the Dharma exists in the first place and why all the Buddhas appear in the worlds, is to lead everyone back to their Buddha nature. The master said, all of you listen well. If the deluded people of some time later recognize sentient beings, they will recognize them as the Buddha nature. If they do not recognize sentient beings, they could seek the Buddha nature for 10,000 eons without ever meeting him. I teach you now. To recognize the sentient being in one's own mind is to see the Buddha nature in one's own mind. If you wish to see the Buddha, just recognize the sentient being in your own mind. It is only sentient beings who are deluded as to the Buddha. The Buddhas are not deluded about sentient beings. If you are enlightened to your self nature, then the sentient being is the Buddha. If you are deluded as to the self-nature, then what might be a Buddha is only a sentient being. If the self-nature is universally same, the sentient being is a Buddha. If the self-nature is false and steep, the Buddha is a sentient being. If your minds are steep and crooked, then the Buddha is hidden within the sentient being. If a single moment of thought is level and direct, then the sentient being becomes a Buddha. One's own mind possesses the Buddha, and this own Buddha is the true Buddha. If one is without the Buddha mind, oneself, where could one seek the true Buddha? Your own minds are the Buddha. Do not doubt this. Outside of this, there is not a single thing that can be posited. All of us generate the 10,000 types of dharmas from our own fundamental minds. Therefore, the sutras say, when the mind is generated, the various types of dharmas are generated. When the mind is distinguished, the various types of dharmas are distinguished. So this is the duality of sentient being and Buddha. The Buddha is within the sentient beings, and the sentient beings is within the Buddha. An enlightened Buddha, so the Buddha, being enlightened, can see sentient beings, but sentient beings, being unenlightened, cannot see the Buddha. If we wish to see the Buddha, all we have to do is enlighten to our sentient beings. And if we can see the sentient being within ourselves, then that is the Buddha from within. I will now leave a verse for you in parting called the verse of the true Buddha of the self-nature. If people of later times understand the point of this verse, they will see their own fundamental minds and achieve the enlightenment of the Buddhahood. The verse goes, the such-like self-nature is the true Buddha. False views and three poisons are King Mara. During the false delusion, Mara is in one's home. During correct views, the Buddha is in one's hall. When false views and the three poisons are generated in the nature, this is for King Mara to come reside in one's home. When with correct views one eradicates the three poisonous states of mind, Mara is transformed into the Buddha, true and not provisional. The Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Namanakaya, the three bodies are fundamentally a single body. If one can see it oneself within the nature, this is the cause of Bodhi and the achievement of Buddhahood. From the Namanakaya is fundamentally generated the pure nature. The pure nature is always within the Namanakaya. The nature makes the Namanakaya practice the correct eightfold path, and in the future will be perfect and complete, true without limit. The licentious nature is fundamentally a cause within the pure nature. To eliminate the licentious results in the body of the pure nature, within the nature you should all transcend the five desires. In the instant that you see the nature, they are true. If you can encounter the sudden teaching in this lifetime, become enlightened immediately to the self-nature and see the world-honored one. If you cultivate by trying to become a Buddha, you'll never know where to seek for the true. If you are able to see the true in your own mind, having the true will be the cause of your achieving Buddhahood. If you do not see the self nature but seek the Buddha externally, every activation of the mind will be that of a big fool. This sudden teaching is being left for you now, but you must cultivate it within yourself in order to save others. I tell you, future students of the way, if your view is not like this, you will come to great sorrow. So this is his final message, the final verses that he left us before departing the world. Basically, the Buddha is the true correct views, the Mara are the false views. But as you can see, true arises from the false, and so the Buddha arises from the Mara. If we can convert our false views into correct views, we can eradicate the three poisons, and then Mara is transformed into Buddha. It's not like we have to avoid Mara and then find Buddha. We have to transform Mara into Buddha by transforming correct views from our current false views. So basically all he's saying is to just rely on yourself. Everything that we want and need and are searching for is within ourself, is within our mind, is within our experience, and we cannot seek anything externally. If you are able to see the true in your own mind, which is the ultimate practice, having the true will be the cause of your achieving Buddhahood. But if you do not see the self nature, if we are not looking for the self nature, if we are not even trying to practice inward, but instead we are seeking Buddha externally, like most people do, sadly, then every activation of the mind will be that of a big fool. This sudden teaching is being left for you now, but you must cultivate it yourself in order to save others. After the master spoke this verse, he announced, "You may all stay here, but after my nirvana, do not become upset and cry tears like rain. Those who accept condolences from others or wear mourning clothes are not my disciples and are not following the correct Dharma." So he's being very stern, very strict. Even at the time of leaving, he's saying, if you are attaching to the point where you are crying and being upset, and you are wearing mourning clothes, you are not my disciple and you are not cultivating the Dharma. Because what you are doing is just attaching to appearances. You are cultivating the environment, you are cultivating the characteristics, and you are not remaining unmoved within the characteristics. Just recognize your own fundamental minds and see your own fundamental natures, which are neither moving or still, neither generated nor extinguished, neither coming nor going, neither correct nor false, neither abiding nor going. I am afraid your minds are deluded and you don't understand my meaning. I will tell you again, in order to make you see your natures. After my nirvana, practice in accordance with this, just as if I were alive. If you go against my teaching, it would be of no use even if I were alive. I will say another verse. Stupefied, not cultivating good, leaping, not creating evil, serene, eradicating knowledge, vast, the mind unattached. So don't cultivate good, don't create evil, don't eradicate knowledge, and then the mind becomes attached and it's vast. When the master finished saying this verse, he sat upright until the third watch of the night. Suddenly he announced to his followers, "I am going." And peacefully he went. At the time, a strange fragrance filled a room. filled the room. A white rainbow touched the earth. Trees in the forest changed to white, and the birds and animals cried out. In the 11th month, the officials of the 3 prefectures, Guangzhou, Shaozhou, and Xinzhou, the monks and the lay people argued, as people do, over the ways to receive the master's body. Since they could not decide, because they all wanted a piece of him, they burned incense to gain a portent, saying, "The smoke from the incense will indicate the direction in which the master's body should return." The smoke from the incense connected directly to Kaoti, where he came from, where he was from. On the 13th day of the 11th month, the master's casket and the bow and robe he had transmitted were returned to Kaoti. In the 7th month of the next year, the casket was open, and the disciple Fang Bian spread incense paste on the master's remains. Remembering the prediction about the taking of the head, they lacquered the master's neck with metal sheets and placed it in his stupa. Suddenly, a white light appeared from inside the stupa that went straight up to heaven. 3 days later, it began to dissipate. The prefect of Shaozhou memorialized about these happenings, and an edict was promulgated from the establishment of the stele according to the master's spiritual activities. The master was 76, not quite as old as the Buddha, who was 80. He received the transmission of the robe at 24. The Buddha actually attained his awakening at 29. 29. And he offered up his hair to become a monk at 39. But this was because he was being chased for so many years. So he was living with the hunters. He preached the Dharma to benefit sentient beings for 37 years and transmitted the Dharma to 43 people. So he was the first person in the lineage to break the tradition, the transmission tradition. Normally you would just transmit it to one person and it would just pass on forward. He memorialized his robe and bow and transmitted the Dharma to 43 different disciples. The number who became enlightened and transcended the state of unenlightened ordinary person cannot be known. The robe that was transmitted by Bodhidharma as an emblem of the faith, which was of Kuxuan cotton from the western region, a precious bow of polished manava given by Emperor Zhongzong, and the image of the master sculpted by Fang Bian, if you remember from the chapter of the encounters, and his religious implements are stored forever at the training center in Baoling Monastery. Si means monastery. This Platform Sutra has been transmitted in order to make manifest the central doctrine, the doctrine of the self-nature, to disseminate the triple treasure, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and to benefit all living beings. End of the Platform Sutra of the Dharma treasure of the Great Master, the Sixth Patriarch. So this is the end of the Platform Sutra. I hope you've enjoyed the 10th chapter as well as all the chapters with me. I've enjoyed it a lot reading this, and it has really inspired me to continue my practice and to further my practice so that we can all attain the fruits together. If you have any questions, please leave a message in the comment section below, and please like and subscribe if you want to stay updated for following Storytime Sutra readings. The next sutra I'll be reading will be the Diamond Sutra, the Vajra Chedaka Prajñā Paramita Sutra, which is loosely translated to mean the Diamond Cutting Sutra, which is also the Perfection of Wisdom. So the Diamond Cutter, Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. And this is one of the main sutras that are studied in the emptiness tradition. So this is the Emptiness Sutra, the sutra that explains emptiness. What does emptiness mean? Okay, stay tuned for the next episode, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.